The first time I felt it, I was sitting at my desk, plowing through the never-ending pile of paperwork. It was a subtle sensation, like a faint tickle beneath the surface of my skin. Just a slight twitch on my forearm that I brushed off as a muscle spasm. Life in our sleepy suburban town was mundane at best, and I was a 30-year-old office worker who had never been one for drama or flights of fancy. My life was as ordinary as they come, defined by the monotonous rhythm of daily routines. No history of medical issues, no reason to suspect anything out of the ordinary. But that sensation, that peculiar, niggling feeling, it didn't go away. It lingered, a persistent whisper beneath my skin that something wasn't quite right. At first, I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just stress or maybe a deficiency of some sort. I increased my water intake, adjusted my diet, even tried those relaxation techniques the internet raves about. But nothing changed. If anything, the feeling grew stronger, more insistent. It was no longer just a twitch, it felt as though something small was moving under my skin, wriggling its way through my veins. I remember the first time I truly acknowledged that this wasn't normal. I was standing before the bathroom mirror one evening, the fluorescent light casting a harsh glow over my features. As I stared at my reflection, trying to convince myself that I was just overreacting, I saw it. A small undulating movement beneath the skin of my wrist. It was so subtle, yet unmistakably real. A wave of cold dread washed over me. I wasn't imagining things, something was definitely wrong. With a sense of unease settling in the pit of my stomach, I resolved to seek medical advice the next day. Little did I know, that was just the beginning of a journey into an abyss I never knew existed. The following morning, I found myself sitting in the sterile, impersonal office of Dr. Hammond, my family physician. I explained the situation, trying my best to sound rational and not like someone who had spent the night reading about every possible skin condition on the internet. Dr. Hammond listened patiently, nodding occasionally as he made notes. After a thorough examination, which included palpating the area where I felt the movements, he suggested a series of tests. Blood work, skin biopsies, even an MRI scan were conducted, leaving no stone unturned. I appreciated his thoroughness, clinging to the hope that this was just a minor issue, easily resolved. Yet, a part of me feared what they might find, or worse, what if they found nothing at all. A week of anxious waiting later, I was back in Dr. Hammond's office, bracing myself for the results. He looked at me across his desk, his expression unreadable. "All your tests have come back normal," he said, his voice measured. "There's no sign of any infection, parasite, or foreign body. Your blood work is impeccable, and the scans show nothing unusual." I sat there, a mix of relief and frustration washing over me. Relief that it wasn't something immediately life-threatening, but frustration because the sensation under my skin was getting stronger, more pronounced. I could feel it even then, a squirming, writhing presence that refused to be acknowledged by modern medicine. Dr. Hammond must have seen the confusion and fear in my eyes. "It's possible that what you're experiencing is psychosomatic," he suggested gently. "Sometimes, our minds can create physical sensations that feel very real. I'm going to refer you to a colleague of mine, a psychiatrist. It might help to explore this from a mental health perspective." I left his office feeling defeated, the invisible, undulating presence beneath my skin mocking me with its intangible reality. Was I losing my mind? Was this all in my head? The thought was as terrifying as the sensation itself. The sensation grew intolerable, stretching beyond a mere quirk of my body into a constant source of torment. It was as if my own flesh had turned against me, harboring a malevolent presence that writhed and squirmed with a life of its own. I could see it sometimes, the faint ripple of movement beneath the skin of my arms, my legs, disturbingly visible yet elusive to the touch. Sleep became a distant memory. Night after night, I lay awake, feeling the ceaseless motion under my skin. My mind raced with thoughts of what it could be, each more horrifying than the last. I was trapped in a cycle of exhaustion and paranoia, the lines between reality and nightmare blurring. In desperation, I returned to Dr. Hammond, but the repeated tests and scans brought back the same baffling results. Nothing was wrong with me, at least not physically. The doctor's insistence that it was all in my head only fueled my growing sense of isolation and despair. Driven by a need for answers, I turned to the internet, plunging into the depths of medical forums and obscure websites. That's where I stumbled upon accounts from others who had experienced similar symptoms. Their stories were chillingly familiar, tales of unexplained movements and doctors who couldn't find anything wrong. But what truly unnerved me was that many of these people seemed to have vanished without a trace, their online activity ceasing abruptly, leaving only their haunting words behind. I withdrew from the world around me, my friends and family becoming distant echoes in the back of my mind. My job, my hobbies, the little joys of life, they all faded into insignificance. I was consumed by the need to understand what was happening to me, to find someone, anyone, who could tell me I wasn't going mad. As the days turned into weeks, the sensation under my skin grew more aggressive, more assertive. It was no longer content with mere movement, I could feel it pushing against my flesh, straining as though seeking an escape. I was a prisoner in my own body, helpless against the growing darkness within. My life had become an unending nightmare, each day bleaker than the last. The thing under my skin was no longer just a sensation, it had become a visible, terrifying entity that seemed to be feeding off my fear and confusion. In a moment of utter desperation and madness, I decided to confront it directly. I locked myself in the bathroom, the cold clinical light casting stark shadows across the room. My hands trembled as I held a small, sharp knife, the kind used for precision tasks. I rolled up my sleeve, my eyes fixated on the undulating movement beneath my skin, now so pronounced it seemed to be trying to break free. Heart pounding, I pressed the blade against my skin, steeling myself for what I was about to do. I made a small incision, wincing at the sharp pain. Blood welled up, but my focus was on the thing underneath. I expected to see some grotesque creature or writhing mass. Instead, I saw something far more horrifying. It was like a shadow, a dark formless substance that seemed to recoil from the blade. It moved away from the cut, evading my attempt to extract it. My blood ran cold as I realized this wasn't something living in the traditional sense, it was something else entirely, something unnatural. Panic overtook me. I dropped the knife, clutching my bleeding arm. I stumbled out of the bathroom, my vision blurring as a mix of pain and fear overwhelmed me. I barely registered the sound of my own screams before collapsing into darkness. I awoke in the hospital, my arm neatly bandaged, the sterile smell of antiseptics filling the air. The doctors told me I had lost a lot of blood but had been lucky. They asked me why I did it, but how could I explain? How could I make them understand the terror of the shadow beneath my skin, a horror that defied logic and science? Lying in the hospital bed, a sense of helplessness engulfed me. The doctors had treated my physical wound, but they couldn't see the true cause of my torment. They talked around me, words like psychological evaluation and stress-induced hallucinations floating in the air. But I knew what I had seen and felt. It was real, more real than anything I had ever experienced. I met with the psychiatrist, Dr. Ellis, a man with a gentle demeanor and probing eyes. He listened as I recounted my story, his expression a mixture of concern and skepticism. He spoke of delusions, of the mind's power to manifest physical symptoms in times of extreme stress. He prescribed medication to help with my anxiety and sleep, suggesting regular therapy sessions. I nodded and played along, but inside, I felt a growing sense of doom. The entity, the darkness under my skin, was still there, moving, growing, consuming me from within. I tried to resume my normal life, but the facade of normalcy was brittle. At work, I was met with hushed whispers and sideways glances. My friends and family tiptoed around me, their concern tinged with fear. I felt alienated, a stranger in my own life. The medication dulled my senses, but it couldn't dull the presence inside me. It was relentless, an ever-present reminder that I was host to something unexplainable, something terrifying. Each day, the movements became more forceful, more insistent. I could see it now, not just feel it. My skin rippled and bulged with its movements, a grotesque display that kept me isolated, trapped in a body that was no longer solely mine. I stopped looking in mirrors, unable to face the horror that stared back at me. My existence had been reduced to a constant state of fear and revulsion, waiting for the inevitable moment when this thing inside me would reveal its true purpose. There I was, sitting alone in my dimly lit room, the heavy curtains drawn to block out the outside world. The presence under my skin had grown more aggressive, a constant writhing reminder of my descent into this personal hell. I could feel it moving, always moving, an alien entity that had claimed my body as its host. I had stopped going to work, stopped seeing my friends and family. They couldn't understand, couldn't see the reality of my situation. The doctors and psychiatrists were no help, they viewed me through a lens of clinical detachment, their diagnoses and medications useless against the growing darkness within me. In the solitude of my room, I watched in horror as the movements beneath my skin became more pronounced, more visible. It was as if whatever resided in me was growing stronger, feeding off my fear and despair. I wondered if I was transforming into something else, something not quite human. The nights were the worst. Lying in bed, I felt the entity move with purpose, its undulations sending waves of panic through my already frayed nerves. The boundaries between my body and the intruder blurred until I couldn't tell where I ended and it began. I became a prisoner in my own skin, a spectator to the horror that unfolded within me. The entity's intentions remained a mystery, its origins a puzzle I was too terrified to solve. All I knew was that it was a part of me now, an unwelcome parasite that had woven itself into the very fabric of my being. The story of my life, once so ordinary, had taken a turn into the unknown. I was left to ponder my fate, the chilling reality that I was no longer alone in my body. The presence under my skin was a constant companion, a dark secret that I carried with me. And so, I sit here, writing this account as a testament to my experience, a warning to those who might one day find themselves host to a similar darkness. I don't know what the future holds, or what will become of me. All I know is that the entity is still there, beneath my skin, a part of me now, forever. The end, then, is not an end at all, but a lingering question, an open-ended mystery that haunts my every moment. Where did it come from? What does it want? The answers elude me, lost in the shadowy depths of my own flesh. All I can do is wait and endure, a silent witness to the growing darkness within.